So welcome back, friends of the channel. I'm here to give you an exciting update on a great opportunity on Versed Community for you to start practicing poetry and finding your own voice. I'm here with Śivani Howe, who will be leading an introduction to poetry writing in December on Versed Community. And before we jump into it, let me just introduce Śivani. Śivani Howe is a poet and a teacher obsessed with eco-poetry and spiritual poetics, good food, and trees. She is the author of the poetry collection This Is Written in the Stars, which gained #1 hot new release in poetry on Amazon in 2024. She's studying for her master's in poetry at Pacific Oregon University and has been featured in the Poetry Lighthouse too. Upon learning that anthologies and IHRAM Press, their enduring voices for Q3 of 2025. She resides with her family in the Purcell Mountains of British Columbia, Canada, and believes that reconnecting and coming into right relationship with land spirit is the fastest way to heal the human heart. Well, it's so great to see you, Śivani. Thanks for coming on and doing this video with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
We are really excited to have you teaching on Versed in December. You know, one of the things that you and I have been discussing is how in the study of poetry in the academy, there's really two sides. There's the academic study of poetry, which is so much interested in the criticism and the analysis and the explaining. And then there's the MFA side, which is interested in the participation of the creative process, right? And there's doesn't seem to be much dialogue between the two, is there?
Not really, except for when people like you and I get together.
Exactly.
And it's so much fun.
That's kind of the exciting thing, I think,
Mhm.
that we're doing on Versed is many of the lectures and the courses that I teach there are all about the study, the academic study, the analysis, understanding how poetry works. But what's really exciting about what we're doing here in December and hopefully in the future as well is this whole idea that you'll be teaching the practice of poetry as well. So we're going to have both sides, it seems like.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's really exciting to be able to come and share this with everybody and really complement everything that you've brought to the table in this wonderful community.
Oh, I can't wait. And the first thing you're going to give us is
Mhm.
a lecture called
The
The
writer's
Writer's
life.
Life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that.
So, as I stepped into being a writer, I, like many people, went through so many different ways of like, I can't really call myself a writer. At what point do you call yourself a writer? What does it mean to be a writer? And as I studied poets and writers from through the ages, everything
Mhm.
from Dorothy Wordsworth, through her brother, William Wordsworth, right through to contemporary poets of Jane Hirschfeld and, Louise Glick. And what does it actually mean to be a writer? And I feel that there is an entire philosophy to the writer's life that isn't celebrated enough and isn't explored enough in our Western culture. And so I want to share some concepts and some thoughts and plant some seeds for people to play within their own life and play within their own experience of what is the writer's life.
That's fantastic. It really sounds like the way you've described it. In a way, this lecture is interventional. It's helping bring something that's often ignored. I'm just curious, what do people, in your opinion, what do people often get wrong about the writer's life and this whole process?
Well, I think from my own perspective and from the people that I have worked with, the thing that they get like quote unquote wrong is that they see the writer's life over product versus process.
Hmm.
And to be a writer is to be in process. The product is a very, very, very small part of a writer's life. The writing is a very small part of the writer's life. And it's all those other things that create a writer's life. It's life that I think has so much beauty and so much creativity in it that regardless of whether or not anybody ever reads what you write, regardless of whether or not you're a published writer or if you get paid for it, like that's irrelevant. You, the writer's life is an orientation to the moment. And so to start looking at it as a process of witnessing and being part of your life consciously versus the product of what you put on the page, I think is a really interesting, uh, it's an interesting conversation to have with others, but also with yourself.
Absolutely. That's so, I love that distinction, product versus the process, and that really you're kind of collapsing the boundary between life and the writer's life. It sounds like the writer's life actually is the stuff of life. It brings you in touch with it, and it's all about really the experience itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm so excited about this and what the students are going to be receiving from this lecture. I'm curious if you could speak to that. What do you think students are going to gain from this?
Well, I think one of the biggest hurdles when people start writing um, is permission and courage and curiosity, right? Permission, courage, and curiosity. And I think it's the combination of those three things that actually
Mm.
starts the creative juices flowing and a creative life, regardless if you write or paint or garden, right? A creative life is a life of incredible richness. So, yes, we filter this through the process of writing, but a creative life is not just about words on the page. So, my aspiration for this lecture is to plant the seeds for people to start to look at their own lives from this place of where can I bring more courage? Where can I bring more
Exactly.
curiosity? Where can I bring more of myself to the moment? And then how would I express that in whatever creative endeavor you want?
Exactly. You know, it's I love how you've mentioned the permissibility that's needed to
Mhm.
engage.
To play,
Exactly. It's all
to
about,
to play.
yeah, the intellectual, the creative play.
Hmm.
Um, Friedrich Schiller has a great phrase for this. It's the play drive. It's kind of when you activate both the rational side and the more emotive and creative side, and together they kind of form this drive that leads to creativity. That's really, it sounds like a prerequisite for creativity. Um,
Hmm.
I just love that because I find that analysis. My channel is called Close Reading Poetry, so there's a lot of picking poems apart. Um, I find that can do two things. One, it can show that poetry really is an art. That's something that can be taken seriously, and this is a good thing. But there's a shadow side to that, I find, which is
Hmm.
a sort of overwhelm at the sense of the intricacy of, say, a
Hmm.
good sonnet, of
Hmm.
a good ode or a
Hmm.
haiku.
Hmm.
There's so much in poetry that you just cannot reduce to an analytical, um, uh, well, to an analysis. And I
Hmm.
think that you bringing this side to about the creative process, about writing poetry, is going to be so helpful to those of us who have been studying poetry from an academic analytical perspective to really engage with it.
Hmm.
And so this leads me to kind of the questions about self doubts. What are some of the self doubts that people often encounter in this process of writing poetry?
Well, I think one of the most important acknowledgements, and this is part of what I'm going to bring to this lecture, is showing how every human, not just every writer or every creative or every artist, but every human has self-doubts to their ability, to their value, to their worthiness. And I think it's really important to acknowledge them, but then acknowledge that when we put our energy into looking for validation from that place, we have also shifted our orientation to why we're doing this. And when we can realign to the why we write, then it's how it is received becomes a secondary consideration. No, as a poet who makes a livelihood teaching, who is published, all of those sorts of things, those, very like, third dimensional acknowledgments and things like that, it is a part of the process. However, I think for people that are not writers, they see it as a much bigger part of the process than what it actually is, right? That publication, that putting your work out in that sort of critical way, as in to be criticized and analyzed by other people, is a very small part of what it is to be a writer. And for me, the reality is when I realized that this is what I wanted to dedicate my life towards, is to support people and inspire people to find their voice, was that I like who I am when I'm writing. Now, I may have days, weeks, months where I consider everything I write to be complete hogswash, right? But in the hogswash, I like who I am. Even when it's hard, even when what I'm writing is stupid, even when I'm writing I'm never going to look at again. Or I may leave it for 6 months and come back to it. I may leave it for a week and come back to it. I may leave it for a year and come back to it. But in the process of the moment when I am allowing that experience to be acknowledged on the page, I love who I am. And so my philosophy is if I can create a life where I'm joining the dots of activities and aspects where I love who I am at every point, then that is a life worth living. And so that's how I orientate to the writer's life.
I love how you've described that because it really puts you in mind. And we've talked about this with W.B. Yeats and Emily Dickinson. Some of these poets, even Robert Frost, talk about poetry as if it were a conversation, really with the self. So it seems like this whole creative process, the intellectual play that's involved, is also a process of self-discovery, or at least can be. Is that an accurate way to put that?
Yeah, I think it's a perfect way of putting that. Every sentence, every line, every stanza that I put on the page is a conversation. It's a conversation with an aspect of myself. It's a conversation with the poem. It's a conversation with what the poem wants to be in the mirror of what I think the poem should be. And this dynamic that goes back and forth until one of us is changed. And my prayer is that it's always me that's changed by the end of writing the poem. Let me be changed, because the poem is going to be what it wants to be, right? And so we're in service to the poem, but to be able to orientate the writer to be in service to the poem, there's an entire process the writer goes through, and that's the process I want to share with people.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. By the way, I love the way you talk about poetry. I think there's going to be so much here in this workshop that's going to give people the ability, the permission, as you say, to engage in this process, to
Play.
understand their own voice, to play. Exactly.
Yeah.
So the lecture, The Writer's Life, 1 week in Versed. It's on December 11th. More details about the time will come, but anyone who is a subscriber to Versed community, anyone who is just a paying member, will have access to this lecture. And
Absolutely.
this is your sign. If you're out there and you're interested in poetry, maybe you don't know much about it, and you want to practice it, learn how to get in touch with yourself, the world again, this is your sign. This is your opportunity. So I do hope you'll join us Thanks so much, Shivani, for being here, for this lovely conversation, and for what you're going to bring to Verse Community in December.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
We're all very much looking forward. Thanks again.